point, as far as being able to stand with someone with different views, how does politics and political views play into matchmaking?
Yeah, so that is a question I do ask. It's definitely a question I do ask, and it depends on how you stand on your views. So there's some people who are like, I believe in this or I vote this way, but when it comes down to it, I'm not allowing politics to meddle with my everyday life. So those people, it's a little bit easier. But if I am matching someone who, let's say, they are very conservative and they have a conservative platform and they're working for a conservative group and this is something that they're doing every single day, then okay, yeah, they may not be the best one to match with someone who may be super liberal. So it kind of depends on their stances and how infatuated with those political views they are.
Here's a question, and to kind of, and this is something that I've heard, and I'm currently in the process of writing a book about singleness in the church, and I've heard several women say, "Where are all the good men at in the church?" So I'll ask you, so who uses your services more, men or women? And
Women.
okay, and what is the frustration of, I guess, some women that might not see you guys wanting to, I guess, use your service?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, it's harder for sure to find the men because we know that, again, I'm going back to say there's definitely less men out there, and then of the dating pool, I have to think about men that are actually intentional. That's my second hang up and challenge, and that's what I'm hearing from the women as well. They're meeting these men on dating apps or at different social events, and they come to find out that this guy, he may be talking to a couple of other women already. He may not, he's just not ready to settle down. And I think that goes back to us talking about these unlimited options. Men have so many options these days. So when you find someone who's intentional, I know for me as a matchmaker, I hold on to that person. I'm like, okay, if I can't match you with XYZ, just give me a few months. I bet I'm going to come across someone who would be a right fit for you or who would be interested. But really finding those men that are ready to be intentional is another challenge for me, at least.
How do you keep the hope alive? Because those statistics have also, been kind of beaten into women's heads, and sometimes that can make them feel a sense of despair or discouragement, like, oh, I'm probably not going to meet somebody that is a good match because the options are so limited.
Yeah, and that's really going back to kind of like Amber's point about interracial dating. That's when I really encourage them to be open because I find the scarcity is typically if you're only looking in, let's say, for instance, you only want a Black man. Okay, well, it's going to be pretty scarce because there's not that many out there that are single and then ready to settle down. But how about if we open the pool up a little bit? Then look, we've just opened it up to hundreds more men. So that's kind of how I keep that hope alive. And typically when I push back on that, they're like, you know what, I wouldn't mind. And like I mentioned earlier, you don't have to commit to them. Just go on a date and see how things go.
So you just mentioned date. So here's a question. While we have you, I want to pick your brain on this. What is the difference between courting and dating exclusively?
Ooh, that's a good question. So my understanding has always been that courting is for the purposes of marriage. And so you are being very intentional. You're getting to know this person. And I'll even go as far to say, which I know that this is in today's climate, I would even go as far to say as when I see people or hear people talk about courting, I'm hoping that they're abstaining from sex. When I hear people talking about you, and the other question was dating exclusively, right, Reggie? Yeah, when I hear about people dating exclusively, okay. So the term when I hear exclusive in the secular world, I think about I'm not being with anyone else. And when I say being, I assume you all kind of know what that means, as getting to know you biblically. So that's kind of from my lens, I think of it from a sexual perspective.
Well, okay, let's go a little further. So what about courtship versus dating intentionally as Christians? Is there a difference?
I don't really see there as a difference. The only thing I would say is in a courtship, I would say it's only going to be you and committing to this one person. Dating intentionally, anytime I attach dating to something, I'm assuming that you are literally dating around or dating for the purpose of finding your partner. When I think of courtship, I'm thinking you've already found that partner and you are spending intentional time getting to know each other.
Yeah, me personally, my outlook is dating is the introductory stage, and courtship is the okay. We are no, we no, you're no longer a free agent.
Yeah, yeah, basically. That's how I see it as well.
So, does anyone else have a question for Brooke?
Yes, and it's actually about questions. What are some of the questions that you would recommend to, for girls and, well, females and males on dates to ask each other? What are some of those things that can help them get to know each other, whether they, if they're going to be a good match for each other? And this is coming from the background of like, I read this quote where somebody was recommending, instead of asking what are your 3-year goals in the future, you can actually ask what are 3 things that you had a goal in the past and you were able to accomplish, or what were your goals 3 years ago and how far are you on that? And that kind of gives you like a better sense of the type of ambition that person has. Because if you just ask them what are your 3-year goals, like your goals for the next 3 years, they may just make up something that sounds good and you'll be like, yeah, I like that, but it's not necessarily that they're going to put in the work. So I was just wondering if you have any other types of good questions that people can ask each other.
No, that's great. And I always recommend open-ended questions. You want to get that person talking. And people love to talk about themselves. So one thing is, instead of asking pointed questions like, what do? You could ask something like, hey, why did you choose that profession? Or what do you enjoy about your career? That way that person can add as much details as they want. And, there's going to be a ton of follow-up questions you can ask just by what they say. So I definitely recommend those open-ended questions. And like you said, Gracious, asking them things about their past, their past experiences. What was your favorite vacation spot? These are things that they've already experienced, so they can talk about it. They have plenty to say. That's a good question.
Yeah, because it's nothing's more unnerving than like going to a job interview. Basically, like, where do you see you in 5 years? Like, I didn't know I had I've been in situations like that where I'm like, and I'll think it's gonna be a date, and then this is a job interview, basically, and it has that vibe, and that scares a lot of people away. And it maybe that could have been a good relationship potentially, but it's almost like that. All right, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? How much money do you think you're going to make in 5 years? Or where do you see yourself like? And it just kind of, they could word the question in a better way to where you start talking more about yourself and getting to know each other instead of just having these like clear cut like nope, yeah, no, and that just kills the vibe. It really does.
Well, Matt, I want to kind of jump in what you're saying. So some people see relationships as just a business venture in of itself. When I asked one of my good friends about his marriage going pretty good, but he was telling me from the jump that, this is a very sound financial decision on my part and hers. We're going to make a great partnership. And he was speaking in business terms. And I don't want to be in business with a person that I'm married to necessarily, barring having my own business, whatever. But what I mean is the act of going into a relationship, I don't think it should be so cold, because there's going to be emotions involved. I mean, you may want the list of items and notations to make this a perfect business venture, but there's going to be emotional ties whatever happens, because you spent time together, there's going to be these things that are going to be left. I guess the word is things left unsaid. And once you see it as more, once you see it as just a business thing, you kind of detach yourself from the love part. And if you find a way to kind of balance it between, okay, this will be a business thing, sort of, but there's a whole love element here that's at play, then you find a real relationship. That's my point of view.
That kind of goes into the acquiring things, if you see it as a business. Because usually when I see people say that, usually, not all, but usually it's because we acquired all these things. We can go on expensive trips. We drive, luxury vehicles. We got the kids, the 3 kids, and we have, one boy, one girl, and another girl or boy. We have this life, the American dream. That's what we have. Versus kind of like you said with love, it may not be that, but you guys are just, like I said, out there really doing it together, doing life together.
So I was going to bring an opposing view and kind of play devil's advocate. I'm not the devil, but so I actually have heard this relationship guru, and she talks about how she did not marry for love. And not to say, she explains, in her post where she's talking about it, that it's not that she doesn't love her husband. I mean, they've been married for years, but I think they just celebrated 11 years. But she talks about how, love was not the deciding factor for her in terms of whether or not she would marry him, or it was going to, she was going to choose him to be the one for her. And because she talks about how marriage is not just about love. It's not just about your feelings and your emotions, because those things change too over time. And she talks about how there is an element of business that you have to think about. This is an opportunity to build generational wealth, to build legacy, to, establish impact in your community. And so, going back to the purpose things that we were talking about, she was looking more from that side and seeing yes, evaluating him as a business partner in terms of can we do the business of life together? And the things that I want to accomplish, can I accomplish that with you? Or is it, because sometimes people have been struggling all their life and they don't want to keep on struggling. They don't want to be on the struggle bus, and is that bad? And here's a question for you all. When it comes to money, I know we're typically taught that, money shouldn't matter, and it's superficial, and not to be a gold digger, but is money something that we should throw out completely? I would say that it's not, because the truth of the matter is life runs with money. So if your significant other doesn't really care about money, and they either are not, pursuing to increase the income of the household, or they're fine with, living, and not to knock food stamps, but that's something that people have to get on to survive, with the hopes that there is going to be, opportunities that come along the way that they can take advantage of. But you might have some people who are like, no, I'm fine right here, So what are some of those things that we should consider? And I would say that money is something to consider, and that some business elements are things to consider. That's my perspective.
That's not
Go ahead, Matthew.
I just want to say, you definitely want somebody that's competent and can provide, obviously. The point, I think the point Reggie was talking about is something I can kind of touch on, because I've been in entrepreneurial circles where it was definitely the business move is the fact, and I've been in entrepreneurial business realms where, you're in the office and someone just says, hey, so-and-so's, licensed in this industry, you'd be a great couple, you build a great business together, you just need to go ahead and get married. I was pressured at one point to do that. There was no compatibility, there was no feelings, there was no nothing, but it would have been a good business move. And for people like that, you really get it in you really get this a lot in multi-level marketing companies, heavy. You can't marry someone outside of this company, you can't marry someone outside of this business. You can't do anything like that. And I've had experience in that arena. And you can't they have to be here. I mean, and it's forbidden to date outside of that arena. And so that's the business mindset. these are your prospects right here. And that I don't agree with. You definitely want to have, again, it goes that part of it, because that's more your purpose. That's not just okay, we can financially afford to live in a place kind of a thing. That there's a difference between being financially compatible and business. That's not the same thing. Financially compatible. Yeah, you can support each other. You bring in money. I mean, you can hold a job. You can pay the bills. You're competent. You're an adult like that. Okay, but the other one is then you're just a business partner. And I've seen marriages end because they were really business partners for spouses. And that just, it is cold. I mean, then you just start seeing them and they just almost start shaking each other's hands, and they just, I'm like, aren't you married? It really is, it's really cold. And I really see that I really see that a lot in I'm just gonna call it the beast where it is. It's really big in multi-level marketing. It really is. In those environments, you have to marry within that company. I've heard it tons of times. Ask anyone who's had experience in that arena, and they'll tell you, you have to marry someone in the company, or you're really just browbeat. And to be honest, and that's the wrong way of looking at it, because that's not. I mean, what if God's saying, no, that's not who you. Number one, that's not where you're supposed to be. You're not gonna be there for long. But your wife is, or your husband's over here. So that's business. Financially, yeah, you want to make sure that they're with it. But I just wanted to kind of separate those two, because finances, yes, but business, there has to be some form of love and compassion and physical and emotional attraction there, for sure. Because if not, it's just going to be another business transaction, and then you can just fire them and bring someone else in, and then okay,
that's Hollywood.
Yeah.
You mentioned attraction. That's a good question too. Have you ever matched someone who had all the good qualities, but they just ended up not being attracted to them, physically? And what do you recommend in that situation?
That's a good question. I think that's one thing, going back to men being visual creatures. If they're not attracted to a woman, it's really hard. They either don't want to go on a date with them, or once they see them in person, they're like, oh, I don't want to continue on. So for the men, with visual things being so important, honestly, if you're not attracted to someone, you're not attracted to someone. But with women, they may not have that initial spark, or may be attracted to them physically. But if that man, shows her kindness or respect, or, he really speaks to her love language, then I think that attraction for him can develop. So I think it's easier for women who, if they want to stay in it a little bit longer and give it some more chance, like we were talking about with love, someone who may have started off not loving their partner, but because, they've, built this, or they really complement each other, then that eventually comes along.
We're getting ready to close, and I just would like to thank you, Brooke, for coming on and enlightening our minds and allowing us to gain a few new neurons in our brain in regard to the topic of Christian dating, or just dating in general. I hope this has helped to someone. So, you know, if anyone else like to say something before we close, we can get ready to end this.
I just want to thank you for coming on. I think that this is a minefield for a lot of people, but I don't think it has to be. I think that, you know, we make this super complicated. I think particularly in the Christian and the church, the Christian community and the church world, we make it an all or nothing thing. Like, and we've talked about this before. We can continue talking about this, but it's almost like this. Like, I saw you talking to somebody last Sunday at church or last Saturday at church, so that must be your spouse. Like, that's not necessarily the case, you know. So and so I just think I think ultimately what we should learn out of this is just like what I keep getting out of this is obviously compatibility. You can't force attraction, and as a guy, I really, you know, like, I understand that. Like, I mean, people try to set me up with somebody, I'm like, no, sorry. There's just zero there, and you can't force chemistry and you can't force attraction, but you can still develop great relationships with people and friendships. So I want there to be like this friendship thing that can kind of come out of this whole process of just, I mean, dating is a little more intentional, but just in life, just value relationships. And I think that'll make the dating process a lot easier when you just value relationships and people, more than yourself even.
Gracious. Amber, you guys have any closing statements? Closing remarks?
Well, I'm also grateful for this conversation that we've been able to have today. And thank you again, Brooke, for joining us. It's been a pleasure picking your brain and hearing the lovely work that you are doing. I think it's really noble or cool, I don't know, that you did, you know, think outside of the box and try to offer something that was like, you know, a need, right? Like for communities of color that may not necessarily have access to that. I think my biggest takeaway from tonight is just the idea that when it comes to relationships, you have to be open-minded, but you also have to know what's in your own mind, like what you like, and come to the table ready to offer that, and also ready to receive that from the person that you're considering. So, yeah. Thank you for your insights.
Yeah, thank you all so much for having me. I will say I learned so much just in this discussion, and I'm empowered and I'm ready to get to work. I'm gonna have to hook all y'all up.
I'm in a relationship, so let me not say
Well, maybe not you, Gracious.
I am not, and I wouldn't mind the insight. Okay, guys. Well, this has been a great night, and we're gonna go ahead and close and say goodbye to our viewing audience. All right, everyone. We're gonna just wave. All right, everyone. Take care. All right. That's another episode in the can. All right.